Blog Talk Radio. Greetings and welcome to the Sales Sense Reality Talk Show with your host, Mike Krause. Mike has sold over $100 million in sales and offers Fortune 500 strategies, tactics, and tools to sales professionals and business leaders. He created this show with one thing in mind, for sales professionals to share their secrets with each other. Join us every Wednesday at 12 to 12:30 Eastern Time, or sign up for updates on Mike's mailing list at salessensesolutions.com. Mike appreciates you listening and wishes you good luck on your next sales call.
Well, welcome. It's Mike Krause with the Sales Sense Reality Talk Show. I'm really excited to have a very motivated guest, Jim Bouchard, with us today. He is a small business operator, and he learned long ago that everyone in business is in sales. I also learned that no matter what sales system or protocol you choose, successful salespeople possess two essential traits that are seldom, if ever, taught in technical sales. And one of them is charisma, the ability to develop trust quickly. Some argue that charisma is a natural quality and it takes time to build trust, but their qualities are manifestation of basic mindset characteristics that can be learned and developed. You may not be the next Jeff Gittimer, but you can develop the confidence, courage, discipline, and focus that makes you more attractive and trustworthy to prospects. Those are the characteristics of black belt mindset, and I teach salespeople and other professionals. So, Jim, welcome. Without further ado, how are you today?
I'm doing great. You gave the perfect 101 description right there, so we're off and rolling. Excellent.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to learn more about the mind, and you put a great spin on it with the black belt. Tell a little bit more, number one, about to the listeners, a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, it's interesting because everything that I do, everything I teach in my corporate speaking and conference speaking really derives from my experience as a professional martial artist, and I'm still in that business. We've been in that business I've been a martial artist now for 26 years. We've been in the business of it for about 16. And I think a lot of your listeners will be able to relate to this. Like many business people, I don't meet very many martial artists that go into it and identify primarily as being salespeople, right? Yet when you're in business, you got to sell, right? that's the beginning and the end of it. So at any rate, what I learned over my experiences, as an entrepreneur and as a martial artist, was that what the essential characteristics of mindset behind everything that we do is critical to our success. And the same mindset characteristics that we use to earn our black belts in martial arts are the same characteristics that successful business people use. So as you said, I get to put a nice spin on it and go out and have some fun with folks. And, hey, we even do some punching and kicking at most of our seminars, so it's a lot of fun.
Well, in case someone gets out of hand,
That's right. We can bounce them, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from someone that doesn't know, it's always been like a goal of most people probably to be a black belt. What are the steps that go through to become a black belt?
Well, especially as it relates to what people are facing in business, I divide the black belt mindset really into three huge areas and try to reduce it down to some simple points there. The first one being perfection, right? Becoming a black belt really is a process of perfection. That's critical. We even have T-shirts that say this. It says, perfection is not a destination. It's a never-ending process. Now apply that to business as well, right? Once we look at that, instead of perfection being some place we're going to or some goal, it's nice to have goals and deadlines and quotas, but if you can accept the idea of perfection as a verb, right, as a process, then every little step you take, every little moment you have of even a small success becomes part of moving you forward towards that goal. So that's critical. The next area is confidence, and I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about that today, so I won't go into too much detail yet. But that, as you mentioned in the introduction, that's one of the essential ingredients really to sales success. And the final one is leadership. And to me, leadership is all about sharing, really. Great leaders are people that are able to develop willing followers. And again, let's draw the parallel to sales, right? Very difficult to sell the unwilling, isn't it? I mean, you've had great sales success. I was listening to that introduction. You sold in the millions of dollars worth of products and services. I'm sure you didn't do that by forcing, right, your products and services on people. You did it by I'm sure if we talk long enough, you emulate all the different characteristics that I'm talking about with black belt mindset. So leadership is your ability to go out there and, create willing followers, hopefully by adding value. And I love the fact that you keep using those words, demonstrating value, and really that's what you're sharing with the world.
Absolutely. The giver's gain. That's, I guess, I've always worked on, is the giver's gain. The more you give, the more you gain. So, and you're right. The millions of dollars I did sell, I always did it correctly, and I never forced anyone's hand. I always said, I can walk down the street and I don't have to look over my shoulder. So I think
I appreciate it.
So, but I love, and now let's just jump right into confidence, because that is always something that I struggle with when I'm doing some coaching and personal development. How do you help people gain that confidence, that internal confidence that people can see when they walk into the room? How do you do that, Jim?
I don't know if this is a good selling point for my book and my seminars, but I'll tell you, I can't give anybody confidence. And I'll give you a little background. That's the reason that I got into the martial arts. Before I got involved in martial arts, you couldn't measure my confidence with any sort of test. I mean, it didn't exist. Sometimes we talk about the word self-esteem, and we just did a month of National Self-Esteem Month on our Think Like a Black Belt show. So we were highlighting these issues. But here's the deal: you can't gift somebody confidence. Confidence needs to be earned, and it's earned by taking. And here's the thing: it's so simple that most people won't do it. And what it is developing actionable goals, attainable goals, challenges which are a little bit outside your comfort zone. They don't have to be a lot outside your comfort zone, right? And you just attack those things and do it with discipline and focus. Now, that sometimes requires some help from outside. It sometimes requires some encouragement. And it definitely requires that you stay away from the people that are discouraging you. So, those are really the essential elements to building confidence. But there's no shortcut to it. You've got to get out there and do it. I may be useful in encouraging you. I may be useful in offering some advice or listening. And I'm sure as a coach you do the same thing, right? We listen to what people's interests may be, and then perhaps we can guide them a little bit. For instance, if I hear somebody may be engaged by the martial arts process, I recommend that. That's an incredible way to build confidence, but it's built on the same formula we just talked about. Sometimes people will push back because they'll say, well, that doesn't have anything directly to do with sales. And I say, baloney. Every success I've had in my life since I've been involved in martial arts, I can trace back, again, to the mindset that I developed through the practice of martial arts. So had I not got involved in that, I might still be stuck in what I call my Wayne's World moments, where I wasn't worthy and I didn't know what I was doing and floundering around and not really having any sense of my own value and purpose in the world. So that's what it gets down to. To build confidence, find a challenge. Let's make it real simple. Find a challenge, find something you can do, and hey, just like Nike says, just do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I like your Wayne's World analogy, too, sitting in the basement waiting for things to happen,
And that's important from a number of levels, because the Wayne's World thing goes two ways. There's times when a lot of the people I'm working with are very successful. I had some great successes before I learned this process, but I didn't realize it, you see, because I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel that anything I did. I mean, in a past life I was in the music business, and I played on arena stages. I was a drummer. One of the highlights was playing a show with Dolly Parton, who at the time was one of the biggest stars in the world, if not the biggest. And at the end of that, my phone was ringing, and I wouldn't answer the damn phone because I said, I'm not worthy. I don't think I'm big enough, good enough to handle that level. So that's where confidence is so essential.
Yeah, and it's so true, and I always remember that Seinfeld, too. George always has that confidence issue of, not being able to be worthy of success. I knew I wasn't going to be successful, when the plane's about to go down, and, it's just kind of funny. We're our own worst demon, and the mind is such a powerful thing. And when I do a little seminars on goal planning, and I'm sure you do a lot in that as well, is getting that Olympic mindset or that samurai mindset that you mentioned earlier. Tell a little bit more about how do you develop the muscle in the brain and subconscious level so that you can start building this internal confidence, and what are some things that you have found over your research that has helped people?
Well, again, it's challenge, right? How do you build, if you want to build your bicep, you lift continually heavier weights, right? And it's the
Yes.
same thing when you're building the mind. The mind thrives, and in fact, physiologically, your mind develops connections, right? And now they've even realized, for years we were taught that we didn't produce new brain cells, new neurons after a certain age. Now they're finding that's not true. We produce them on an ever decreasing rate, but the problem is if we don't use them, we lose them. Very simple, right? Just like a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't use those neurons, they atrophy and they die very quickly, only in a matter of days. So the process, really to exercise the mind, you've got to engage it. And that means thinking, that means challenges, it means solving problems. Now, in the sales world, you're doing that all the time. Let's take a little sidebar, because I'm glad you mentioned George from Seinfeld. He's probably iconic of the type of person that I'll say very bluntly, and you'll very quickly realize I'm pretty blunt about things. If he was to come to me and ask me how to build confidence, I'd turn him away. I couldn't work with a guy like that. He's the icon of laziness and complacency, and he spends half his time just trying to get over on people, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, that kind of person's dedicated to doing the complete opposite of everything we're talking about. And that's fine. It's a free country. You do what you want to do. But, again, I can't gift confidence and I can't gift self-esteem. So the Georges of the world, if that's the way you want to be, you're just going to have to stay that way. But if you're willing to take one step closer to what we're talking about, then we have a basis to work from, you see. So, again, it's a matter of sitting down with an individual and saying, and let's do it in a sales template, right? The greatest I'll spin this. I'll ask you, what are the greatest challenges that salespeople face that you work with?
I think it goes right back to their mind. They're their own worst enemy. They're running around doing bad behaviors, and that muscle is encouraging it. They're running around doing proposals. They're afraid to pick up the phone. They're afraid to go out and visit people.
Let's work on that one for a second, because I get the same thing, right? A lot of people have a lot of fear associated with the sales process. And what are they afraid of, right? You said they're afraid to pick up the phone. Well, why? Most of the people I talk to, you tell me if we're singing in harmony or maybe there's some other angles I need to see. But most of the time people will tell me, well, I'm afraid that I'll make a bunch of calls and nobody's going to be receptive today. So they're fearing rejection, right?
Rejection, absolutely.
I made 100 calls and I didn't get any good responses. And yet then you'll have the guy who will make 200 or 300 calls and he's happy with a 1 or 2% response rate back, right? But that person has confidence. That person has perseverance. These mindset traits that we're talking about. That person has learned that it takes a lot of work to get some results. So they're not looking at those minor setbacks as a big failure. Now, failure is another key word we ought to talk about. A lot of people fear failure. Well, what is failure? Mostly, failure is not making an attempt. You can't fail when you're trying. You know what I mean? To me, a rejection or a no, and I'm not saying this in a cliched way. I don't like sometimes when people say, well, every no is really a yes in disguise. I think that's one of the greatest myths in sales, and I think it's destructive.
I agree with you on that.
You agree? Yeah. I'm the salesman's
yeah.
worst nightmare, because when you call me on the phone and trying to pitch me something, if I say no, you can take that to the bank. I don't want what you're selling, you see. I don't mean yes later or anything like that. Now, having said that, it could be, but in an effective sales process, you're going to find that out. You're not going to hit a hard no if the person's feelings are that, yeah, this might be right for me later on, or it may be a similar product or service that you might offer that I'd be interested in, that type of thing. But the fact is that successful people fail a lot, right? We're out there taking our shots at it. So you have to develop that perseverance, that mindset of perseverance. That hey, if you know you're doing the right thing and you know you represent something of quality and value, then you got to hang in there. You got to take the time that it takes to be successful. That almost sounds stupid, doesn't it? But that's really the key. Too many people are willing to throw in the towel in the first few rejections or setbacks, and that's not the way we operate as black belts. We don't knock down 7 times, we get up 8.
That's right. And then you keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 2 big ones right there, and I think fear of failure especially. But other challenges I hear. One of the big challenges I hear salespeople facing too is that sometimes they'll get into representing a product or a service that they don't feel passionate about, and that's pretty sad. I mean, I think of that wonderful movie Glengarry Glen Ross, right?
Yes, classic.
And Alec Baldwin, right, pulls those literal brass balls out of a briefcase, right? Then he says, "This is what you need." And then what does he say? ABC, always be closing. Well, sure, if you're selling garbage, because you got to close before the person changes their mind, right? But if
Correct.
you represent something that's giving, and again, I'm going to reflect your words. I love the fact that you keep using those words, value, right? Quality. When you're representing something that has value and quality, then it's not a matter of closing. It's a matter of engaging a conversation, building a relationship, building trust, and that's where the sales are going to come from. But hey, that takes some time, doesn't it?
It does, and I get approached all the time, just like yourself, and someone says, I'm not confident or I'm not comfortable selling my product. What can I do? I go, I have one answer. I go, quit. It's just not going to work. It's going to come through in your presentation to your clients. It's just going to, you're wearing it. You're wearing it. It's like wearing a leisure suit. Everyone can see you. It's clear as day. It just doesn't work out in that at all.
Exactly. And it has to be value, and that's the thing. The value has to be reflected back before there's a sale. It's much easier, for example, if you're selling. Let's say you have you're running a grinder shop, right? You're making a nice sandwich, and people come in. The risk level is low, right? The entry point is low. They buy the sandwich. They're hungry. Oh, it tastes good. Right away, they feel the value of that product, right? And they experience the value of that product. But let's say you're selling, let's say you're selling commercial airplanes, right? You're working for Boeing or something. It takes a long time to develop the trust and the confidence that you're going to be doing a much higher end of business. Luxury automobiles, right? Things that don't require an instant reward. But people confuse that too. It's not always has to do with price, right? Right now, you walk into any Costco or Best Buy or anything like that, and those flat screen TVs are flying off the shelf. They may cost a lot, but again, the person gets home, they plug that thing in, the TV looks 100 times better than they had before. Instantly, they perceive the value. Unless you're selling something that has that instant gratification, then you've got to build the relationship. That's the primary thing.
Absolutely. And, Jim, that's funny that you bring up Boeing because, interesting enough, I was talking to someone that used to work for Boeing, and they did an interesting sales process. They would ask about your hobby, and then every now and then they would throw out an email, and they would identify you. And he did put down that he was a volleyball. He liked volleyball. But he wasn't a great person at volleyball. So long story short is that he passed on the opportunity, and it was for Brazil to buy Boeing commercial aircraft. So a bunch of salespeople went down there, and for 2 weeks, all they did was play volleyball, and they did not mention one thing about business until the end, until like day 13. And it's building that relationship, building that trust, and it's just understanding the whole sales process is really what makes you unique. And I'll imagine if they walk down, yeah.
And, it's interesting, too. That was a good story. And here's something I'll share. And, in fact, I'll be audacious, and I'll throw this out there for your listeners. I do a breakout workshop it's actually called My Presentation Sucks. And it actually came out of a conversation that I had with a salesperson who had struggled with a presentation. And I'll mention the product, but I don't want to get into too much detail. They actually were selling airplanes. They were selling private aircraft. And what he said to me after, he said, "My presentation sucks." And I said, "Well, in this room," I said, "honestly, the people that were in this room, who were all executive types," I said, "you should have come out of this room with a minimum of 2, maybe 3 orders." I said, "But let me ask you some questions." And this is the reason I'm so passionate about My Presentation Sucks seminar, is that because of my life as a martial arts instructor, we teach through stories and questions, you see. If I can get the other person to walk in my shoes or to think about being a black belt, right, and what it feels like to be a black belt, then that student's going to be much more engaged in the process of that person actually becoming the black belt. And that's what it's all about. And you do that with questions, you do that with stories, And to tell a good story it invites somebody into your life and your experience. So anyway, what I did was I asked this guy, I said, well, tell me about flying. I said, because, and I'm honest about this, I want to be a pilot. So I said, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your experience. Well, he told me this wonderful story all about what it felt like to be in the air and the freedom of it and being able to go wherever you want and avoiding the hassles for business travelers, avoiding the hassles of the commercial flying and whatnot. And I was mesmerized. And when he got done with that, I said, you know what? If you do that, throw away that slide deck. You just tell that story, and you're going to sell airplanes, you see. And that's the whole point of it. Become a good storyteller. We can work on that. And what I'll say is I sometimes offer this program, and I'll offer it for your listeners, any of your clients. If they would like that presentation, I'll do it free. All you need to do is pay for my travel expenses and take me out to dinner. And, of course, they have to be doing business with you. So
okay. All right. That
go.
sounds good.
There you go.
I'll take you up on that. No, that's very generous of you, Jim.
Well, it's a lot of fun.
Moving on.
If you book me soon, make sure it's someplace warm.
That's right. We were just talking about that because you live in Portland and I live in Rochester, and we're getting a little tired of the winter.
There you go.
But anyways, moving on to your book, The Think Like a Black Belt, the second portion really starts to talk about the charisma. And, you know, that is such a powerful word. What does charisma mean to you, Jim?
Well, again, charisma is we can say it's one of the essential qualities of a salesperson. It's one of the essential qualities of a leader, really. And what charisma is again, it's that ability to develop or attract people to you, develop willing followers or attract people to yourself and to your message. Now, sometimes, I would argue that sometimes people say that folks are born with charisma. It looks that way, but what I've seen more of is that when somebody's very charismatic, they often were encouraged from a very young age, or the exact opposite, they're rebelling against something. And for either reason, they become very outgoing and very able to engage people, see? Now, the technical sides of it, and again, these are the things we can teach. Charisma develops out of trust. Now, sometimes that can be betrayed when you have a case like Bernie Madoff or somebody like that, right? He was a very charismatic guy, but he used it for some pretty lousy ends. Thank you very much for messing up all our retirement accounts, right? But
yes, thank
at any rate, but anyway, it can be used for good or evil. I mean, that depends on your intentions and your application. But functionally, behind all that charisma is this. It's, again, ability to build trust, which can be learned, right? It's your ability to present yourself well, which can be learned, developed, and improved. And it's your ability to have that confidence, to project that confidence, again, which can be learned and trained and developed. Now, I'm not saying that, someone struggling with this issue can turn around in 30 days and have the charisma, say, of a Barack Obama or somebody like that is obviously very charismatic. But you can improve it. And each step of the way as you improve, you're going to find better results. And that's going to create the cycle that's going to help you continue that process.
Absolutely. It's repetition equals results, no different than going for your black belt. I think a lot of people probably think you can get that in a half hour or something. And that's another thing is I think we live in such a speed society that we forgot that it actually takes time to develop things. It takes time to develop that internal muscle and that internal behavior. And anything can be learned. You just have to want to learn that behavior. That's definitely
and what you're talking about really is what I express in the idea of power. Power is your ability or capacity to perform or act effectively. Simple enough, right? But you develop power through motivation and discipline applied over time. And you're absolutely right. We live in this instant gratification culture, and to me, I use the story of I'm going to be a McDonald's guy. I'm going to be Jim's Martial Arts McDonald's, and you're going to pull up to the first drive-through window. You're going to order your hamburger. Well, since it's Master Jim at the window, I'm going to say, all right, you want that hamburger when you drive around to the other window, right? When you drive around to the other window, I'll greet you, I'll be smiling, and I'll say, now drive around 10,000 more times, then I'll give you your hamburger. Now, that's probably pretty poor customer service. But the point is that that's what it takes to get where you want to go, right? It takes as much time as you need to put into it. We've got to stop that idea of instant gratification. We want to fulfill our customers' needs and desires as quickly as possible. But what we're talking about is behind that, we want to take the time to develop ourselves so that our customers and our prospects will, again, perceive the value and perceive the trust in us that allows us to make the sale and service them.
Absolutely. And it's setting, I find another thing with salespeople don't do is set clear expectations. If it does take a month, tell your client a month. Don't try to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. It just doesn't work. And I think a lot of times people they over promise and under deliver. That's just how it is. So.
Right. That's essential. Think about it in a martial arts context. We often say, if you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk, right? And ironically, you bring that up. I'm dealing with a dry cleaner who lost a pair of trousers on me, right?
Okay.
part of a suit. Now these guys, we've called them, and I've gone into the store twice, and we still haven't gotten a phone call back. You see, to resolve the issue. That's the kind of thing. You got to be very responsive. If you're going to make a promise or imply a promise by the strength of your brand, right? Because that's very important as well. Then you've got to deliver on those promises. If you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk. Otherwise, somebody's going to come with a bigger bag of knuckles, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and take you out. There's no question about it. And I think that's a lot of times, people are, and nowadays the consumer is more educated. Those days are over, but you also have to be so responsive to your clients and customers' needs, because it's still the same rule of one bad experience they tell 10, and one good experience they're lucky to tell 1 or something like that. I can't remember the exact stat, but
no, absolutely.
People love that. So, well, Jim, we're getting close to the end here already. It went by fast, and I've learned a tremendous amount. I'd like to have you spend a little bit more time on yourself and how people can get a hold of you and kind of what services you offer, just to give the listeners a little bit more familiar with yourself.
Oh, thanks so much, and it won't take long, because the easiest way to get in touch with me is thinklikeablackbelt.org. That's .org. You can also just type my name, Jim Bouchard, Bouchard, for folks who aren't in French-speaking regions. And type that into LinkedIn, Google, Facebook, connect with me there. I'm traveling the country doing corporate and conference speaking. I do some coaching on a limited basis. So we have a lot of neat breakouts that have this martial arts theme, including samurai sales and samurai customer service. And, of course, the Think Like a Black Belt keynote is the flagship. But glad to travel anywhere and come and visit you. We have some great packages that include multiple sessions and very, very flexible. We even have flexible payment options, and I don't know too many speakers that are offering that right now. We have a subscription program because we want an ongoing relationship. We don't, I don't like to blow into town, say my piece, and leave. And you know what happens with that? Sometimes people forget about the message, or they stop doing the things they were all enthused about. So with the subscription option, I'll work with you for a few years, and we'll make sure your people are thinking like black belts.
Jim, you and I think the same way, because that's exactly why I got started in my business here, is because the ones that come in and they get XYZ dollars for a 2-hour speech and then they're gone, all those behaviors are great, but none of them are learned. So I think that's great that you and I have the same mindset, that these things can be learned over long-term relationships, and I encourage people to go out and buy his book, Think Like a Black Belt. It's right off this site, actually, off the radio show on Amazon. You can go to his site as well and just start the process. I think that's all journeys begin with the first step, right? Isn't that
there it is, right? Lao Tzu. And obviously you're a black belt mindset master. And I love what you're saying, because the secret of the martial arts, same secret in sales, practice, right?
Practice. Repetition equals results. I always kind of say that too. But, Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure of you sharing your afternoon here. And I know the listeners enjoyed it, and I learned it a lot too. So I really appreciate your time. And I encourage everyone to go out to thinklikeablackbelt.org, sign up for his newsletter, and get involved and start today. So, Jim, thanks again for taking time out of your day, and I wish everyone good luck on the next sales call.
Oh, thanks for your hospitality.
Thank you, Jim. Bye now.